In the colorful city of Makadara, where the streets were always alive with music, laughter, and the smell of roasted corn by the roadside, Amira believed she had finally found her happy ending. Tariq came into her life like a soft morning light, gentle yet strong, and for the first time she felt seen, cherished, and loved in a way she had always dreamed of. They spent evenings walking through the busy markets, his hand holding hers tightly as if he never wanted to let go. He would tease her about how she bargained too much with the sellers, and she would laugh at how he always paid double because he hated arguments. Together they painted dreams of a future, a home filled with children's laughter, mornings of shared tea, and nights where they would fall asleep talking about their hopes. Every promise he made felt like a thread tying her heart to his, weaving a picture of forever. Amira would often look at him and whisper to herself, "This is it. This is love." She believed that no matter what came their way, with Tariq by her side, life would always feel like the sunrise, warm, bright, and endless. Do you want me to now expand part 2? The mother's cold eyes in the same style and around 200 to 250 words? The first time Amira met Tariq's mother, Madame Fulani, she carried flowers and a nervous smile, hoping to be welcomed with warmth. But the moment the older woman's eyes landed on her, Amira felt a chill. Madame Fulani's gaze was sharp, moving from her shoes to her dress, then to her hands as if every detail needed to be judged. She didn't see a bride standing before her son, she saw a burden. Amira forced her smile, but deep inside her heart sank. Madame Fulani spoke with a sweet tone in front of Tariq, but her words carried hidden knives. "So this is the young woman," she said, pausing too long, letting her silence cut deeper than any insult. Then when Amira excused herself to help in the kitchen, Fulani leaned close to her relatives and whispered, "She is not good enough for my son. Look at her. Nothing about her fits this family." The relatives nodded quietly, stealing glances at Amira as if she were an outsider in her own love story. Amira pretended not to hear, but her ears burned. She sat at the table holding her cup of tea too tightly, praying Tariq would notice, praying he would defend her. But Tariq only smiled awkwardly, trying to smooth over the tension, never daring to challenge his mother. In that moment, Amira realized she wasn't just fighting for Tariq's love. She was fighting for her place in a family that had already decided she didn't belong. Her chest ached, yet she lifted her chin, telling herself to stay strong. She wanted to believe that love could win over pride, that one day Madame Fulani would see her heart instead of her flaws. But that day felt far away, and the coldness in Madame Fulani's eyes left a scar that Amira would never forget. Do you want me to now expand part 3? The insults behind closed doors in the same simple, emotional, and detailed way, around 350 to 400 words? Every visit to Tariq's house felt like walking into a battlefield for Amira. She always tried her best, wearing her neat dresses, bringing small gifts, greeting everyone with kindness. But no matter what she did, Madame Fulani found something wrong. "Your family is humble, isn't it?" she would say with a tight smile, making it sound like an insult instead of a statement. Another day she looked Amira up and down and remarked, "Next time wear something brighter. You look too plain to be sitting in this house." Her words were sugar-coated in public, but the bitterness was meant only for Amira to taste. It didn't stop there. One evening at dinner, while others laughed and ate, Madame Fulani leaned close and whispered, "You speak too softly. A woman of class should have a refined tone, not a village girl's voice." The words cut Amira like a knife. She forced herself to smile, even though her throat tightened with tears. She glanced at Tariq, silently begging him to notice, to stand up for her. But he sat quietly, avoiding his mother's eyes, pretending not to hear. His silence was louder than any insult. Amira went home that night with her chest heavy, replaying every word in her mind. She stood before her mirror and wondered if her clothes really weren't good enough, if her voice was truly wrong, if her background would forever make her less in their eyes. She loved Tariq deeply, but love alone couldn't erase the bruises his mother's words left on her heart. Still, Amira carried herself with grace. She refused to let Madame Fulani see her break, but behind her calm face she was bleeding inside. Each insult was like a scar carved into her soul, reminding her that in this family, she would always be seen as not enough. And the cruelest part was not just Fulani's words. It was the silence of the man she loved, who should have been her shield but chose instead to look away. Do you want me to now expand part 4? The ultimatum in the same style and detail, around 350 to 4. It was a quiet evening when the truth finally came crashing down. Amira had gone to Tariq's house with the hope that, little by little, things would get better. She carried a smile, even though her heart carried all the bruises from Madame Fulani's sharp words. But that night there was no pretending, no polite insults wrapped in sweet tones. Madame Fulani called her into the sitting room, her eyes hard and unkind. "Let me speak clearly so you understand," she said, her voice cold enough to freeze the air. "You will never be my daughter-in-law. My son deserves better. Someone from a proper family, someone who matches our name. Not you." The words hit Amira like stones. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled as she looked at Tariq, hoping, praying, that he would finally stand up, finally fight for her. But Tariq sat with his head bowed, silent, his lips pressed shut as though chained by fear of his mother. That silence shattered her more than Fulani's cruelty. Amira felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of the woman who wanted to see her broken. She lifted her chin, forcing strength into her shaking body. "I love your son," she whispered softly. "And I thought that would be enough." Madame Fulani only smirked, her arms crossed like a queen who had won the battle. "Love is not enough. It never will be." The room felt colder than ever. Amira rose slowly, her heart breaking with every step. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She simply walked away, leaving behind the man she loved and the dream she had built with him. That night, as she stepped out into the lonely street, the weight of silence pressed harder than the rejection. She realized she had been fighting a war alone, and Tariq, the man who promised her forever, had chosen to stay quiet. And in that moment her love story crumbled. Would you like me to now expand part 5? The painful goodbye in the same emotional, detailed way, 350 to 400 words? That night, Amira's footsteps felt heavier than her heart. Each step away from Tariq's house was a step away from the love she once thought would last forever. The streets of Makadara were quiet, but inside her, a storm raged. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks, blurring the lights around her. She had always believed love could conquer anything, but now she understood a truth that tore her apart. Love meant nothing if it wasn't wrapped in respect. She remembered the evenings she and Tariq spent dreaming of a home together, the way he held her hand and promised never to let go. She remembered the laughter they shared, the whispered prayers, the little promises of a future that now seemed like lies. All those dreams shattered in the silence of a man who couldn't stand up for her. She wasn't just losing him. She was losing the family she thought she would be part of, the life she had pictured in her mind so vividly. When she reached her own small apartment, she collapsed onto the floor, clutching her chest as if holding her heart together. "Why wasn't I enough?" she whispered to the empty room. Her sobs echoed against the walls, but there was no one to answer. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it, a seed of strength began to grow. Somewhere deep inside, she knew she couldn't spend her life begging for a place where she wasn't wanted. Wiping her tears, Amira made a quiet promise to herself. She would rise. She would build a life where she was valued, not tolerated. That night, she didn't just walk away from Tariq. She walked away from the dream of marrying into a family that never saw her worth. And though her heart was breaking, her soul was learning. Sometimes the bravest kind of love is the one you give yourself. Do you want me to now expand part 6? Rising from the ashes in the same style and detail, 350 to 400 words? The days after her heartbreak were some of the hardest Amira had ever known. There were nights when she cried until dawn, mornings when her eyes were swollen from tears, and afternoons when the silence of her apartment felt like a punishment. But Amira was not the kind of woman who stayed broken for long. Instead of collapsing, she wiped her tears, stood tall, and decided to pour all of her pain into something that could not be taken from her, her career. She threw herself into her work with a fire no one had seen before. In Katuria, the bustling business capital where dreams were either crushed or built, Amira became a rising star. She worked late into the night, studying, planning, and creating ideas that even seasoned professionals couldn't ignore. Her intelligence made people listen, her creativity made her stand out, and her strength made others respect her in ways Tariq's family never did. Soon, her name began to spread across boardrooms and conference halls. She wasn't just the young woman who had been rejected. She was now the woman who turned her scars into stepping stones. Clients trusted her, colleagues admired her, and leaders began to invite her to the tables she once thought she would never sit at. Every success felt like a small victory against the voices that once told her she wasn't enough. She bought her own car, moved into a brighter apartment, and filled her life with things she had earned through her own hands. People looked at her and saw confidence, but only she knew the nights of pain that built it. Amira was no longer the girl waiting for someone's approval. She was a woman who had learned that rejection could either destroy you or push you into becoming unstoppable. And she had chosen the second path. Do you want me to now expand part 7? A powerful encounter in the same emotional viral style, around 350 to 400 words? At the Grand Business Summit in Couturier, the city's most powerful minds filled the hall, but Amira stood out in her quiet grace. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, her notes neatly tucked under her arm, her confidence glowing brighter than any jewel in the room. As she spoke on stage about innovation and growth, people leaned in to listen. Her words were sharp, her ideas fresh, and her voice carried the strength of a woman who had fought to be heard. When she finished, the applause echoed, but among all the clapping hands, one pair of eyes lingered on her longer than the rest. That was the first time she met Kwame Adeyemi. He wasn't just any man. He was the respected CEO of Adeyemi Holdings, a name that made others straighten their backs whenever he entered the room. His presence commanded attention, but unlike most powerful men, his gaze wasn't dismissive or proud. It was curious, warm, and deeply attentive. When he approached her after the panel, Amira felt a spark she hadn't known in years. "You speak with wisdom beyond your years," Kwame said, his tone sincere. "It's rare to find someone who combines passion with intelligence like that." For a moment, Amira was caught off guard. She was used to being judged by her clothes, her background, her family name. But here was a man who didn't care about any of that. He saw her brilliance first. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from business strategies to life philosophies, and with every word, Amira felt something shifting inside her. Kwame didn't just admire her work, he respected her mind, her resilience, her story. And in that simple encounter, Amira realized she was standing in front of someone entirely different from the world she had walked away from. Someone who valued her not for where she came from, but for who she had become. Do you want me to now expand part 8? A love built on respect in the same style and detail, 350 to 400 words? What started as business soon turned into something deeper. Kwame admired not just Amira's intelligence, but the resilience in her eyes, the kind of strength that comes only from surviving heartbreak and still choosing to rise. In meetings, he would watch how she defended her ideas with calm confidence, never raising her voice yet always leaving the room silent with respect. Outside of work, he discovered the softer side of her, the way she laughed freely when she felt safe, the way she spoke about her dreams as if they were within reach. Their partnership grew naturally. At first, it was long hours spent planning projects and discussing strategies. But slowly, the conversations stretched beyond deadlines and numbers. Soon, they were sharing late-night talks about life, about pain, about the lessons they had both learned on their journeys. Amira found herself telling him stories she had never shared with anyone. And he listened, really listened, as if every word mattered. What touched her the most was how he never tried to change her. He didn't want her to be louder, richer, or better. To him, she was already enough. He respected her space, her choices, and her voice. For the first time, Amira felt what love should truly feel like. Not a battle to prove her worth, but a safe place where her worth was already seen. One evening after a long day, they sat on a balcony overlooking the glowing city lights of Couturier. Kwame looked at her and said softly, "With you, I don't just see a future. I see peace." His words melted the last of the walls she had built around her heart. Amira had once thought love was about holding on no matter how painful it was. But now with Kwame she understood. Real love was gentle, equal, and strong. And for the first time her heart felt at home. Do you want me to now expand part 9? The proposal that changed everything in the same emotional and detailed style, 350 to 400 words? The night Kwame proposed was one Amira would never forget. It wasn't a grand stage or a crowd of people watching. It was just the two of them on a quiet evening, sitting by the waterfront of Couturier, where the city lights danced across the waves. Amira had her head resting on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, she felt completely at peace. She didn't know he had been carrying a small velvet box in his pocket all along, waiting for the right moment. Kwame turned to her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Amira," he said softly, "life has taught me many lessons, but the greatest one came when I met you. You've shown me what true strength looks like, what grace looks like. And I want to spend the rest of my life honoring that strength, not dimming it." Her heart raced as he got down on one knee. The city faded around her. All she could see was him. He opened the box to reveal a ring that sparkled under the moonlight, but it wasn't the diamond that brought tears to her eyes. It was his words. "I don't promise you riches," Kwame continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I promise you respect. I promise you partnership. I promise to see you always exactly as you are, and to love you for it. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Amira's face as her hands shook. In that moment, every scar, every rejection, every cruel word she had endured seemed to fade away. She whispered through her tears, "Yes, yes, Kwame." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and instead of applause or cheers, there was only silence. A sacred silence filled with gratitude and love. Amira leaned into him, her heart overflowing. For the first time in her life, she felt not just chosen, but truly valued. Would you like me to now expand part 10? The wedding announcement in the same style and detail, 350 to 400 words? When the wedding invitations were sent out, it was as if the entire city of Katuria caught fire with excitement. Amira and Kwame's names, printed in elegant gold letters, became the talk of every office, every salon, every cafe. People whispered about the powerful union, the brilliant young woman who had risen from heartbreak, and the respected CEO whose name carried weight in every boardroom. It wasn't just a wedding. It was an event that everyone wanted to witness. News traveled fast, and it wasn't long before it reached Tariq's family. Madame Fulani was sitting in her living room, sipping tea with her friends, when one of them casually mentioned, "Did you hear? Kwame Adeyemi is getting married, to a woman named Amira." The cup slipped slightly in Fulani's hand. Her heart thudded as she repeated the name, her face stiff. "Amira?" she asked sharply, though she already knew the answer. "Yes," her friend confirmed almost gleefully. "Your son's old fiancée. The one you didn't approve of. She's marrying his boss." For the first time, Madame Fulani's proud smile faltered. She sat frozen, her tea untouched, her mind racing. The very girl she had called not good enough, the one she had dismissed so easily, was about to walk down the aisle with the man who signed Tariq's paychecks. It was a humiliation she hadn't prepared for. Tariq, too, heard the news. First, he didn't believe it. He laughed bitterly, thinking it was just a rumor. But when he saw the invitation himself, Amira's name beside Kwame's in bold letters, reality hit him like a storm. His chest tightened, his pride stung. The woman he had let slip away in silence was now marrying the man he respected most. The city buzzed louder each day as the wedding drew closer, but inside Tariq's house, there was only heavy silence. For Madame Fulani, it was more than a wedding. It was a reminder that the girl she had rejected had risen higher than she ever imagined. Do you want me to now expand part 11, the day? The day finally arrived, and Obeilwa Gardens had never looked more beautiful. The grand hall shimmered under the afternoon sun, decorated with golden drapes and fresh white flowers that filled the air with their sweet fragrance. Outside, the streets were lined with sleek luxury cars, their polished surfaces glinting like jewels. Guests poured in, dressed in vibrant African attire, flowing gowns, bold head wraps, and richly embroidered agbatas that turned the hall into a sea of color and culture. Everywhere you looked, there was laughter, music, and the hum of excitement. But beneath all the celebration, everyone knew this was not just a wedding. It was a story people would tell for years. The hall buzzed with whispers. "That's her, the woman Madame Fulani rejected. And she's marrying Kwame Adeyemi himself." Some guests leaned closer, eager not to miss a single detail, because they knew this day would be remembered. Inside, the atmosphere felt electric. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, the live band played softly in the corner, and servers moved gracefully between tables filled with delicacies. Every chair was taken, every eye waiting for the bride. Madame Fulani arrived quietly, her face tight as she tried to hold her dignity. But no amount of fine jewelry could hide the discomfort in her eyes. For her, every laugh and every whisper in the room felt like a knife. Tariq followed behind her, his head lowered, avoiding stares. And then, as the music shifted, the doors of the hall slowly opened. Heads turned, voices hushed, and the air grew still. Everyone knew the moment they had been waiting for was here. The bride was about to walk in, and the world was ready to see how the story of rejection had transformed into triumph. Would you like me to now expand part 12? The Isle of Victory in the same detailed and emotional style, 350 to 400 words? The doors of the grand hall opened, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. All eyes turned, and there she was, Amira. She stood at the entrance in a breathtaking gown that flowed like a river of silk, its golden embroidery catching the light with every movement. Her veil framed her glowing face, but it wasn't just the dress that silenced the crowd. It was her presence. She didn't walk like a timid bride hoping to be accepted. She walked like a woman who had already claimed her worth. The music rose softly, filling the hall as she took her first steps down the aisle. Each step echoed louder than words. Each glance she received was filled with awe. Whispers rushed through the guests. Is this the same Amira Fulani rejected? Look at her now, she is a queen. Amira kept her head high, her smile calm, her spirit unshaken. This was not just a wedding march, it was her victory walk. Madame Fulani sat frozen, her eyes locked on the woman she had once called unworthy. The golden glow of Amira's gown reflected in her eyes, and for the first time she had no words. All the insults, all the rejection, all the pride she once held melted into bitter silence. Tariq, standing quietly at the back, felt his chest tighten as regret swallowed him whole. He saw in front of him the woman he had failed to protect, the woman who had become more than he ever imagined. And now she was walking toward his boss, a man who valued her in ways he never did. As Amira reached the altar, she looked at Kwame and saw admiration shining in his eyes. In that moment she knew she had won. Not just love but dignity, respect, and her own story. The girl once called not good enough now stood as the woman who had proven she was more than enough. Do you want me to now expand part 13? The mother's silent regret in the same powerful emotional style, 350 to 400 words? Madame Fulani sat stiffly in her chair, her hands gripping the edge as if it could stop the shame washing over her. The proud woman who once spoke with confidence now sat pale and silent, her lips pressed tightly together. She had spent years convincing herself that Amira was not good enough, that her son deserved a woman with wealth and status. But now, as she watched Amira standing at the altar in her golden gown, exchanging vows with Kwame Adeyemi, the truth burned inside her. She had been wrong. Every word the officiant spoke echoed like a reminder of her cruelty. When Kwame held Amira's hand and looked at her with deep respect, Madame Fulani's chest ached. That was the kind of love she had never allowed her son to give. Around her, guests were smiling, clapping softly, some even whispering, "She has truly risen." Each whisper felt like a blade cutting into her pride. She glanced at Tariq, who stood in the shadows, his eyes dark with regret. It pained her to see her son so broken, but deep inside, she knew the wound was one she had created. By rejecting Amira, she hadn't just destroyed a love, she had pushed away a future that could have lifted her family higher. And now, in front of everyone, her son's boss, the man she could never command, was marrying the woman she had once humiliated. Fulani's throat tightened as she realized something more painful than the whispers. She couldn't undo this. She couldn't turn back time. All she could do was sit there, forced to witness the happiness of the woman she had tried to tear down. Amira never looked her way, not once, and that hurt most of all. In that silence, Fulani felt the weight of her own choices. The woman she called not enough was now everything her son had lost, and she was powerless to stop it. Do you want me to now expand part 14? The contrast of two men in the same dramatic and emotional way, 350 to 400 words? Tariq stood at the far corner of the hall, hidden in the shadows where no one paid him any attention. His eyes never left Amira as she stood beside Kwame, radiant in her golden gown. Each vow she spoke felt like a dagger, not because of her words but because of what they meant. She had found the love and respect he should have given her. His chest burned with regret, but regret was useless now. He remembered the countless times Amira's eyes had silently begged him to defend her, to stand by her when his mother's insults cut deep. And each time he had chosen silence. He told himself he was keeping peace, but now he saw the truth. His silence had destroyed the very love he thought he was protecting. Across the hall, Kwame stood tall, his hand holding Amira's with certainty. His voice was steady, his eyes full of admiration. There was no fear, no hesitation, no weakness, only respect. The difference between them was so clear that Tarek felt small, almost invisible. Kwame hadn't stolen Amira. He had simply offered her what Tarek never had the courage to give. As the applause rose and the hall erupted with joy, Tarek's throat tightened. He wanted to step forward to say something, anything, but it was too late. His boss had taken the woman he couldn't protect, the woman he once thought would be his forever. Now all he could do was watch her slip further away, her laughter belonging to someone else, her future sealed with another man. In that moment Tarek finally understood. Love isn't lost in one big moment, but in the small silences, in the words never spoken, in the courage never found. And his silence had cost him everything. Would you like me to now expand part 15? The woman who chose respect in the same emotional and dramatic way? 350 to 400 words? The moment Amira and Kwame exchanged vows, the entire hall filled with thunderous applause. The sound echoed against the golden walls of Obeilwa Gardens, but inside Amira's heart, there was an even louder applause, the sound of her own soul finally finding peace. She looked into Kwame's eyes, steady and full of respect, and for the first time, she knew without doubt that she had chosen the right path. This was not just a wedding. It was a story of survival, of rising after being broken. Only she knew the nights she had cried alone, the days she had doubted herself, the scars left by cruel words that once told her she wasn't enough. But here she was, standing tall, being celebrated, not for the family she came from, not for her background, but for the woman she had become. Madame Fulani sat silently, her face pale, her pride crushed. Tarek remained in the shadows, drowning in regret. And Amira, the same woman they had once dismissed, now stood in front of the whole city as living proof that rejection is not the end, but the beginning of something greater. As the music played and the hall filled with cheers, Amira smiled softly. She hadn't needed revenge, nor had she begged for acceptance. She had simply chosen herself, chosen to honor her worth, and in return she had found a love that honored her too. Her journey was complete, from rejection to triumph, from humiliation to honor. The woman who was once told she would never be enough had shown the world that she was far more than anyone could measure. And with each step she took as Kwame's wife, she carried not just her own victory, but the hope of every woman who had ever been told she wasn't worthy. Would you like me to now polish and connect all 15 parts together into one smooth 4,000-word script so it flows like a complete dramatic story?